President Donald Trump took to Truth Social to announce a sweeping 100% tariffs on Chinese goods beginning November 1. He didn't simply escalate a trade dispute. He rewrote the stakes of U.S.-China diplomacy. His post framed Beijing's newly imposed export curbs on rare earth minerals as very hostile and questioned whether there seems to be no reason to meet President Xi Jinping at the upcoming APEC summit. In one stroke, Trump turned a technical trade conflict into a spotlight on confrontational foreign policy. But the key questions now are, is this a negotiating gambit or a prelude to full-blown tariff warfare? Will China back down under pressure or double down? And who, beyond Wall Street and Washington, will get squeezed in the fallout? Now over to the home front. Tchiroma recounts election victory amid threats from Atanga Nji. As we delve into the details, this and more will be explored in today's Flash News. Good afternoon and welcome. I am Tabitha Arko. Let's begin. President Donald Trump on Friday escalated U.S.-China trade tensions by threatening a sweeping 100% tariff increase on Chinese imports and canceling a planned meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping after Beijing's imposed new export restrictions on rare earth minerals. In a Truth Social post, Trump denounced China's action as very hostile and accused it of sending letters to countries worldwide to impose export controls on each and every element of production tied to rare earth. He said the U.S. had never seen anything like this. Trump added that while the U.S.-China relationship had been very good in the prior 6 months, China's latest move surprised him, and that he now saw no reason to meet Xi at the upcoming APEC summit in South Korea. Now, meanwhile, China's Commerce Ministry responded by defending the rare earth export rules as legitimate, citing national security concerns and criticizing U.S. tariff threats as hypocritical. Now, though Beijing didn't immediately retaliate with new levies, it warned the U.S. that it would act firmly to protect its interests if the U.S. proceeded. Now, analysts interpret Beijing's restraint as leaving room for negotiation, whilst still signaling that strategic leverage will be preserved. Now, Vice President J.D. Vance, in an interview with Fox News, had this to say about China's stance. Let's take a look.
They basically, not just with the United States, but with the entire world, threatened to completely cut off trade for critical resources, critical minerals, things that all of us rely on. And what the United States has is we have a lot of leverage, but we also think that we can have a positive relationship with the People's Republic of China, but not if the Chinese go down this pathway of cutting off the entire world from access to some of the goods that they produce. And Maria, this really highlights why the president, it was so important that he declared a national emergency and implemented these tariffs in the first place. The fact that the People's Republic of China, the fact that they have so much control over critical supply in the United States of America, that is the definition of a national emergency. But unless we have access to this tariff authority, it's going to be very hard to negotiate with China, and it's going to be very hard for us to reshore some of these critical supplies and goods that we absolutely need for our own economy.
That's coming on from Fox Business. Now, financial markets reacted sharply to Trump's announcement. The S&P 500, Nasdaq, and other indexes plunged. The S&P dropped more than 2% in what analysts described as one of the steepest one-day losses since April. The core issue causing the breakdown: China's tightened control over rare earth minerals. Now, the new rules require foreign firms to obtain Chinese licenses, even if they use trace amounts of Chinese-derived rare earth, and restrict the transfer of magnet manufacturing technologies. So because China dominates nearly 70 to 90% of processed rare earth and magnetic materials critical to batteries, electronics, defense, and clean energy, the restrictions risk deep disruptions to global supply chains. Now, Western companies have already sounded alarms about production bottlenecks, price spikes, and difficulties finding non-Chinese material sources. Now, despite the rhetoric, some diplomatic channels remain open. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has indicated that communications were active over the weekend and that preparatory staff-level talks are planned to coincide with upcoming global finance meetings in Washington. Still, we see that the timing of Chinese export controls just weeks ahead of the proposed Xi-Trump meeting has intensified skepticism over whether a diplomatic breakthrough is visible. Observers say both sides may be using tariffs, export controls, and public posturing to sharpen their leverage ahead of negotiations. Now, what is the bottom line? The U.S.-China trade truce is facing a serious test. China's newly expanded export curbs on rare earth have exposed a key vulnerability in global supply chains and also prompted a standoff in which President Trump is strengthening massive tariffs and canceling diplomacy. Whether the current escalation leads to de-escalation or a renewed tariff war will still depend largely on how each side, China and the U.S., interprets the leverage they now hold on. Now, moving on. With the breaking news we just had during the week, the United States President Donald Trump scored a major diplomatic victory on Monday by pressuring Benjamin Netanyahu to sign the Gaza deal. But how long will Israel still hold on? How long would it be on the board? On Monday, as world leaders gathered in Egypt to formalize a ceasefire and hosted release deal between Israel and Hamas, an agreement he personally brokered. Let's take a look.
Today, we welcome you here to thank you for your pivotal leadership in putting forward a proposal that got the backing of almost the entire world. A proposal that brings all our hostages home. A proposal that ends the war by achieving all our objectives. A proposal that opens the door to an historic expansion of peace in our region and beyond our region. Mr. President, you are committed to this peace. I am committed to this peace. And together, Mr. President, we will achieve this peace. We've done it before. We've done it before in the Abraham Accords, and we'll do it again.
Now we see that the accord marks a rare breakthrough in the decades-long Middle East conflict, but maintaining it could prove difficult as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu faces growing domestic pressure ahead of next year's elections. Analysts say Trump's continued leverage over Netanyahu will be critical to ensuring the peace plan holds. The United States president managed to persuade the Israeli leader to accept a 20-point plan framework for peace while securing commitment for regional actors to press Hamas into releasing all remaining hostages. However, major divisions persist. Hamas and Israel remain at odds over the disarmament of the militant group and Gaza's post-war administration. While Hamas accepted Trump's plan in principle, its leadership has resisted a clause requiring it to relinquish political power in Gaza. Now we see that the ambiguity of Trump's plan, seen as a key to achieving initial consensus, could become its greatest vulnerability as both sides navigate unresolved issues. Netanyahu also faces internal political risks. Right-wing allies, including members of his governing coalition, have expressed dissatisfaction with halting military operations before achieving what they call the total defeat of Hamas. Their discontent could threaten the coalition's stability and force Netanyahu to reconsider his stance if Hamas delays disarmament. That's the current situation right there. But how does Benjamin Netanyahu intends to go about this? Trump's influence over Israel stems partly from his long-standing support for the country, including recognition of Jerusalem as its capital and sovereignty over the Golan Heights. Those actions have earned him popularity among Israelis and strengthened his ability to exert pressure on Netanyahu. Now, but maintaining the ceasefire will test both leaders. The upcoming Israeli elections could shift Netanyahu's political calculus, while regional players may hesitate to push Hamas toward full compliance if Israel's political class rejects the idea of a future Palestinian state, a provision included by President Donald Trump's peace framework to win Arab backing. Now, diplomatic observers warn that failure to sustain progress could unravel months of negotiations and reignite conflict in Gaza, also undermining what President Trump hopes to showcase as a signature foreign policy success. I mean, having to strike this deal, the peace deal with Hamas and Israel, is such a breakthrough in the Middle East. And we hope that definitely this would take a long time. It would definitely be maintained. Now, moving over to the United Kingdom. Conservative Party leader Kemi Badenoch faces growing internal pressure after new polling revealed that nearly half of party members believe she should not continue as leader. According to the survey, 50% of Conservative members said Badenoch should step aside, while 46% think she should remain in post. The results come after the party's annual conference season, which analysts say failed to boost public confidence in either the Tories or their leader. Now, in a separate internal poll, Badenoch trailed her closest rival, former Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick, by 7 points. 39% to 46%, highlighting widening divisions within the party's ranks. Now, we see that the figures published after the conclusion of the party conference season show that Conservative support remains stagnant at 17%, with no improvement from mid-August. Labour stands at 20%. Reform UK leads with 27%, while the Liberal Democrats and Greens hold 16% and 13% respectively. Political analysts say the lack of change reflects public fatigue and a failure by both main parties to connect with voters. The conference messages did not cut through, political commentator Anne McElvoy said, adding that Badenoch's flagship policy to scrap stamp duty failed to capture public attention. Now, still in the UK, Badenoch's personal ratings have seen only a marginal rise from 35 to 33, but remain among the lowest for a sitting Conservative leader. Now, by comparison, Labour Sir Keir Starmer stands at 50, while Reform UK's Nigel Farage is at 36. Now, analysts are saying the figure suggests Badenoch has yet to convince voters that she is a credible prime ministerial candidate. Recent IPSOS data also found that only 1 in 10 Britons view her as a prime minister in waiting. Badenoch's leadership has been marked by a harder stance on immigration and UK's relationship with the European Convention on Human Rights. She recently directed her shadow Attorney General to assess whether Britain should withdraw from the ECHR, arguing that it limits the country's ability to control illegal migrants. Now let's take a look.
The Prime Minister literally wrote a book on the European Convention on Human Rights. This is a situation where we need to put our national interest before the ECHR. Does he agree that we should legislate even if lawyers warn that this might be incompatible with human rights law?
Now, however, we see that her approach has not translated into stronger public backing. A Financial Times poll shows that just 6% of voters now trust the Conservative most on immigration, far behind Reform UK's 37%. Let's take a look.
We talked about having a
Kemi,
hard
Badenoch.
cap on visas in law. That was the announcement in November. We've taken some time to look at this policy. And one of the things that is important is that Labour is bringing a bill next week about immigration that's actually going to take the country backwards. They're going to make it easier for illegal migrants to get citizenship. That's terrible. And we are the opposition now. The country's given us a job to hold the government to account. I need to be an effective opposition leader, making sure we steer the government on the right courses.
That's Kemi Badenoch speaking on immigration. Insiders say Badenoch's struggle to unite the party could strengthen calls for a leadership challenge ahead of the next general election. The poll showed the party is not convinced she can turn things around, a senior Conservative source told reporters. Now, as the conference season ends, Badenoch faces a defining test to restore confidence within her divided party and also to reconnect with a public increasingly drawn to alternative voices on the right. Now, that is what is happening right there in the UK. Now, taking your attention over to the home front. From the home front, Paul Tchiroma Bakri has declared himself the winner of Cameroon's recent presidential election, despite reports of intimidation and threats orchestrated by Minister of Territorial Administration, Atanga Nji. Now, speaking to reporters and supporters after the polls, Tchiroma expressed deep emotion and gratitude to the Cameroonian people for what he described as a historic victory achieved through courage and resilience. Tchiroma thanked citizens who voted and protected their ballot, describing them as the true heroes of the democratic process. He also acknowledged other candidates who congratulated him, saying their gestures honor our democracy and mark the beginning of a new era where the unity of the opposition and civil society becomes an irreversible force. Let's take a look.
First, I want to say thank you to the Cameroonian people. Thank you for believing in me. Thank you for believing in us. Thank you for believing in change. Thank you to all who voted and to all who protected their vote. You are the true heroes of this victory. My gratitude also goes to all the men and women who fought this battle before me. Without your work, we would not be here today. For this, I say thank you. I also thank the candidates who have already sent me their congratulations and recognize the will of the people. Their gesture honors our democracy and marks the beginning of a new era where the unity of the opposition and the civil society becomes an irreversible force. In the coming days, I will share with you a detailed report of your vote by region as compiled from the result publicly posted in accordance with Article 113 of the Electoral Code in polling stations across the countries and the diaspora. These results deeply moved me. They show that this victory goes beyond my person. It is a clear sanction of the regime in place and a plebiscite in favor of immediate change.
While giving his speech, Tchiroma called on state institutions, administrative authorities, and security forces to respect the will of the people and avoid becoming enemies of the nation they are meant to serve. Now, addressing Cameroonian youth, he emphasized that the future belongs to them, pledging national reconciliation, institutional rebuilding, and a dignified future for all. Tchiroma announced plans to publish a detailed report of regional results in the coming days, asserting that the figures clearly sanction the regime in place and represent an overwhelming victory for immediate change. And while official results from Cameroon's electoral body have yet to be confirmed, Tchiroma's declaration has intensified political tensions, especially amid accusations of interference from government officials during the voting process. Now, as he has stated, the coming days will definitely give us a clearer account to the results. With this, we're definitely coming to the end of today's Flash News. Remember, we'll bring you Undaunted at the top of the hour, 8 p.m. Until then, do have a pleasant day and stay safe.